Welcome to Not Just Ads, the show where B2B brands discover how creator-led content drives pipeline, builds trust, and grows long-term brand equity. Each episode, we speak with business leaders, founders, and creators who are defining their categories. I'm your host, Marcus Sherwin, and this is the Creator Economy for B2B. Hello and welcome today to Not Just Ads, the Creator Economy for B2B. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Patrick Ward. Patrick is, he has a number of years experience in the marketing space though. Currently he leads institutional marketing at Vanguard, but prior to that he was in Media Monks and he's worked across a number of different roles in international marketing as well. So I'm really delighted and excited to get into the conversation with Patrick today. Patrick, thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me, Marcus.
Great. Maybe you could walk us back in terms of how you got into marketing, how it all started on, and up until where you are today in Vanguard.
Yeah, so like many people, I started from a college major, but it wasn't my first. I tried economics first and flunked out of that. I tried a finance major, don't tell my current employer that, but then I found my space in marketing, and it was the intersection of psychology as well as like human behavior and business that I really gravitated towards. So like many of us, especially those of us who grew up in the 2010s, the great place to go to if you wanted to get the experience with marketing was going to an agency. So I spent a number of different years in a variety of different agencies, all the way up to Media Monks, a very large global agency, I believe seventh largest in the world. And from there, I was thinking of my next step. And for those of us who've been in the agency world for a while, we start to look client side. We start to look at how can we take the impact we do on 3-month projects and how can we do it in a more scalable and long-term fashion. And so I looked across the 10 to 15 industries that I've dabbled in over the years, and finance was the one that I gravitated towards. So through a little bit of skillful networking, found my way into Vanguard, and that's where I've been ever since.
Great, yeah. And so when you were in Media Monks then, what was like, what's the big difference in terms of like what you would find going from say agency side to client side? From what have you noticed like that's kind of like a big change?
So funnily enough, especially from a marketing perspective, there's a big tendency to have shiny object syndrome, and all of agencies very much lean into that tendency because they're trying to ship consulting projects, always appear to be up with the latest trends. And so what that means is that you're sometimes jumping from idea to technology. Coming back client side, what I found is there's much more of an appreciation on the fundamentals, right? Like how are you sustainably growing a business over time? And that is very thoughtful. It's not that we don't appreciate different forms of technology when it makes sense, but there's a higher level of rigor. There was certainly from my Media Monks days times we had proof of concepts, and maybe the technology wasn't fully developed. Versus when I applied in Vanguard, we're always looking at like, is this holistically going to benefit not only ourselves as a large institution, but also our clients, and do it in a way that is thoughtful and indeed mission aligned. And that was something that I didn't really expect because agencies, by definition, have to be very nimble, but the client side can really focus around those core fundamentals.
Yeah. Do you think actually it's an interesting point you raise, because I think with agencies, everyone is trying, and I've worked with agencies and then also in companies where they've had in-house agencies, and some of the things that they say the feedback would have in the in-house agency is like, it's great, it's efficient, but sometimes they don't get the what would I say, like the view of like what's happening in the industry, and the agency can give them that because they're working with different verticals and different clients, and it's what's current, what's new. But the point you make about like from the transition from working with agency into client side, that it focuses much more on the fundamentals of the business, and the agency is looking at like, okay, what's current, what's new. Do you think there's a gap for agencies if they become more kind of like integrated in the business, focusing on how the actions that they do, whether it's running paid media, whether it's creative, whatever it may be, but that it's linked to some key kind of business impact, like performance marketing in one way, but also like kind of how that's evolved. Do you think there's a gap in the market for agencies that kind of lean more into that rather than just trying to be like kind of like what shiny toy and what's new, but just focusing on, okay, how can we present ourselves that we actually move the needle for businesses and we present that in our service offering?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen, funnily enough, this shift in agencies where more and more of them, there was always a tendency to verticalize within agencies of like, oh, okay, here are our 3 or 5 core verticals that we go after. But many of them did it in a rather superficial way. They did it, for example, this was the one that is always top of mind for me from the last 5 years. Number of agencies wanted to go into healthcare. Not because they had any particular core expertise in healthcare, but because they saw it as stable, high margin business, right? They were thinking with their business hat on rather than their impact hat on. And so that is something that I think when you can be truly thoughtful about how you're approaching different industries and what value you lead, because you're absolutely right, Marcus. That is something that agencies still can bring to their customers and their clients if they are thinking, hey, am I baked into this industry? Do I really understand the fundamentals of what they are concerned about? Not just from the superficial level of, oh, they care about driving revenue, they care about lowering cost, but really like why are individuals motivated to what they do? And this is something, funnily enough, I go back to even before Media Monks, that one of my previous agencies did very well. We dialed in on the education vertical, and what we specifically dialed into was a director of IT persona that was looking to get promoted. Now that is a contrarian view to, we always talk metrics, we always talk ROI, but there's a very human element here, right? We need to understand that buyers are not just buying for their company's bottom line. They're also doing it to advance their own careers and position themselves well for the future. And so those agencies that truly understand that, which funnily enough has been a perspective I've been very grateful for my agency experience, because I've been able to bring that into Vanguard of like, let's really think about the emotional resonance of like, why would someone choose us versus another provider? That is just so critical to buying decisions. It's not just about the, quote unquote rational buying decisions.
No, it's interesting what you say as well, because like even in B2B, and you've big buying committees, and we assume that people make this consensus and it's based on all these rational points. But there's like what you mentioned about people for what, if it's their career advancing, or it's also that that they don't look bad within the company because they take on a certain provider. There's a lot of irrational decisions sometimes that we just assume that people just follow this funnel metric, and then they're in awareness, and then they go into consideration and so on. And the reality is it never really works like that. I think it's always interesting, I think, especially in the B2B space, that we don't probably see much of that kind of creativity that kind of markets to the irrationality of things. I don't know if you see that in financial services, but in some of the other sectors of leaders that I've spoken with, they kind of think that there's a big opportunity to kind of speak to people where they are, but like also to be conscious of the irrationality of decisions that are made.
Oh, absolutely. I see that, if anything, more in financial services, because it makes sense that there is a natural tendency and a bias towards the rational facts and figures, as I always say. But if at the end of the day we think about what are we delivering to people. We're delivering outcomes of security, stability. Like, those are the types of things that people emotionally resonate with and care about. And it's not just simply, numbers on a chart. And that, funnily enough, is where I think marketing, especially within this industry, can be very powerful, because at its underpinning, marketing is still about psychology. It's about shaping human behavior. It's about thinking about why someone is motivated to buy a certain product versus another. And that can be really disruptive in a really positive way, because it gets people to start thinking more holistically about your customer versus I loved how you put it, like, we all create these arbitrary funnels of awareness, consideration, and purchase. And as we know from our own personal lives, a decision is rarely made in such a linear fashion. It can be, I saw a couple of ads, and then I saw an interview, and then I forgot about it for 3 months, and then I had the pain point that actually brought the issue up again, and then I had to do some more research, and then finally I made a purchase decision. It's anything but a simple linear progression.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about Vanguard. And Vanguard is obviously a very, very well-known company, but for some people that know the name but don't know exactly what Vanguard do, could you explain a bit to the audience?
Yeah, the easiest way I describe us is we are one of the top 5 largest asset managers in the world. And so you can think of the broad swath of financial products that we offer to the world, sometimes to individual consumers. That's most people, when I've told them I have this job, that's what people remember us for most frequently, but also to institutions. Institutions have large swaths of cash on hand that they need to figure out what they can put towards, and we have a variety of products that we can service them with. So yeah, I myself am on that institutional side. Funnily enough, it's all derived from my Media Monks experience.
Well, right. Excuse me. Sorry. And the organization then itself, it's headquartered in New York, right? But I imagine there's global offices, around all the continents.
So surprisingly, our headquarters is actually in Philadelphia, just outside of Philadelphia. And that was a conscious decision by our founder, Jack Bogle, who did not want it to be... he wanted a finance company that was separated from Wall Street. And that all goes back to his very contrarian thesis when he started Vanguard originally as an index fund. And we all know index funds are very synonymous, but back at the time it was revolutionary. And so that's how he approached not only creating the company, but also physically in the location of finding a space where the crew, as we're called, Vanguard being named after a ship, we all call each other, rather than employees, we call each other crew, and we are able to come together in a space that is separated from the other outside influences. I think I lost you, Marcus.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry, I was saying it's interesting because I believe Bridgewater are based outside the city as well. and it's nice to see. It's like you don't need to be based like right where the heart of everything is on Wall Street to also have the same level of success and sorry for my voice and authority. But I'd love to talk to you a little bit about marketing from Vanguard in terms of how you look at that then from an institutional marketing. What is it like if you look at like kind of a marketing strategy in terms of say who you target, your objectives and kind of your positioning from a demand generation aspect. How do you look at that?
So, funnily enough, being in a very highly regulated industry, we have to be very careful and thoughtful about how we approach marketing. And so naturally, that leads us towards education, and it leads us to thought leadership. And that's always the first and foremost pinnacle of our strategy when we're approaching demand generation. Because, we're looking at institutions. Institutions, as anyone in B2B knows, do not make decisions quickly, especially if they're significantly large, and it may cause a significant operational burden for them to pick a particular product or service. And so for that reason, we're looking at sales cycles that are extremely lengthy. Some of them can take many months, quarters, and sometimes even years. And so in that environment where you're dealing with companies that have very senior executives as part of the buying committee, you need to be very deliberate in how you approach them. I always equate it to you're not going to sell someone on what we provide the same way that you would sell an e-commerce platform or a t-shirt, right? That can be done very successfully at volume with one paid media ad, for example, just hitting someone when they're in the position to buy. Given the amount of consideration that goes through, given the amount of consultants that are involved in our world, given the typical RFP process as well, all of those factors go in to mean that we have to lead with education and very thoughtful positioning against our competitors rather than just simply trying to get people to buy instantly.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. How does that look then normally? You mentioned about thought leadership. Is that something where you have like your executives, are they very active in terms of like whether it's on LinkedIn or other platforms? Or is it more from kind of in, say, certain industry publications or both? Or like how do you look at what does thought leadership mean when in terms of marketing to Vanguard?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different components to it. So like one component is naturally being a very large institution, we have a lot of data. And so that data is very helpful in terms of creating very rigorous reports. You can think of this as somewhat akin to the McKinsey effect, right? If you are an authority on a particular topic, you're able, with the right data, to generate some really powerful insights. And so those can be packaged up into a variety of reports. That's like sort of the fundamental basis to our thought leadership. From there, obviously, like you mentioned, there's a distribution mechanism. And that distribution mechanism, I would say traditionally, has definitely gone towards our largest media publications in the finance space. You can think of the CNBCs, the Bloombergs of the world. But increasingly, it is going to social media. Funnily enough, a perfect example I use of this is what our division's former managing director, a man by the name of John James. He shares a lot of our insights through his LinkedIn, and he himself was recognized as a LinkedIn top voice. That is an entirely new way, and that brings with it all sorts of benefits, but also complications. The benefits, obviously, is you get direct correspondence, and you can see in the way that John crafts his content strategy. Yes, there is a lot of emphasis on Vanguard, but there is also emphasis on him as a person. I think most recently he posted an image of him at a concert, so it gives a holistic perspective of him as a person. But the risks, obviously, again, we are a highly regulated industry, and we always have to be increasingly careful about are we saying the right things in the right way and at the right time. And so there's a balance to toe there. But we also know that our consumers expect it. Our consumers and our clients are consuming our thought leadership and our content in a variety of different platforms. And we can't just simply mandate one specific way for them to consume that content.
Yeah.
They want to self-serve. They want to find it in the formats they want, whether it's written, whether it's audio, whether it's visual. all of those need to be delivered in a seamless way so that they can choose when to educate themselves, because that is the tendency of today's consumer.
Definitely. And it's an interesting point what you mentioned in terms of like how they want to control the message, because I just saw, you probably seen as well, John Gray from Blackstone. He's very active on LinkedIn, but a lot of his content is based on where he's running in different cities. And it's really interesting. Then he obviously shares some business updates during that as well. But if you think about maybe 5 to 7 years ago, you wouldn't really see, especially in such highly regulated industries, people sharing that way online. And I think it's been more acceptable now. But I guess there are risks as well in terms of from a comms perspective, that comms are always, they want to be, what would I say, overcautious in case there's any issues with investors or anything like that. From a marketing standpoint then, how do you see that? Do you see this kind of playing out in terms of the demand generation play of like some things that are shared by John in Vanguard, being a thought leader on LinkedIn? Have you seen it like a correlation or causation between that and kind of like the business impact of him being more active there and in terms of demand generation?
Yeah, so that's where we see an increased perception. That is the biggest challenge with any sort of institutional. It can be very hard to get attribution. And this is why in my former roles, I've always lived by the principle of having people self-report attribution, because you realize that when you're taking an omni-channel approach, it's not just one particular piece of content. It's multiple touch points over a multiple months that create a holistic campaign that makes someone perceive you in the right way. And so we've definitely seen, as a result of him, of John sharing, that folks have a positive affect towards us, and through that, it allows us to entertain conversations. I mean, that is the name of the game in our industry is to not push any particular solution. We're really trying to make sure that we're meeting the client where they're at with their needs. And so to do that, we need to make sure that education is first and foremost, but realistically, it's about visibility. For our industry more than any other. Visibility, because of how regulated our space is, means we can be a little bit behind as an industry. Certainly when I compare to my former lives with things like the travel industry or the consumer industry, where folks have always been willing and able to, push the barrier of like what is even possible when it comes to communication. But as you said so eloquently, even though there is those regulations and those concerns from our communications department, what they're seeing is even with that, there is still value in making sure that we're able to distribute that message to those executives. Because here's the fact. Those executives are also spending time scrolling LinkedIn. They're also consumers. They're not just business people. And so we need to recognize that fact, that these buying committees, while they have their business decision to make, they are still being influenced by content of all varieties, not just ours, but from other industries and our competitors.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There's an institute in Australia. They're called you probably heard of them, Berenberg Bass. They're like a marketing. You might have heard of them, and Byron Sharp, his book. But one of the terms that they came up with was around kind of the mental availability, and they did the research across. Maybe you've seen the research across the different sectors, but it was kind of talking about over time when you're building that mental availability, like when they come in market, then that. They may not have raised their hand up until that point, but if you're building that, it compounds over time, and that can appear in all different types of ways, I guess, from whether that's like a post from the leadership team or whether it's from somebody else. But it's very difficult to take that as a standalone thing and kind of go, oh, okay, this campaign we ran for the last 6 months, it's definitely more of a long-term thing. I think in B2B, it's a challenge that a lot of people have, but I think if you look at it in the long term, it can be really impactful.
Yeah, I always like to group our campaigns into different buckets. And specifically to that point, I'm less concerned about any one individual touch point, and I'm trying to look at it in its totality. And what I'm specifically trying to measure is marketing lift, right? Like, what is a campaign that we're doing solely based on sales and no other support, and how are we representing the differential when marketing gets involved and provides that support? Because that's when you start getting really creative, right?
Yeah.
That's when you can start having those experimentation, realizing that you don't have to attribute anything. What I've found, unfortunately, from the last, let's call it 10 to 15 years, is the misguided approach towards attribution. We've acted because we can attribute particular campaigns to particular dollars. That's where the investment's gone. And this hasn't all been solely on marketers. Sometimes it's been our financial peers that have thrusted that upon us, but we've lost something in that. And we've lost the art of realizing that, hey, just because you create a financial model around how you suspect buyers are coming into your funnel and making ultimate purchasing decisions, that doesn't actually always reflect reality.
Yeah,
and so we
100%.
always need to put that underpinning of human psychology that all marketers have an innate tendency towards, and understand that, yes, maybe I can't necessarily 100% attribute that particular social post to the overall effect, but if I can measure it as part of the totality of a marketing lift in the increase in our conversion rates and the increase in our pipeline and the increase in our revenue, then through all of that, I'm able to truly represent the world as it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you don't, then buyers will go where there is the least friction.
No, for sure. And I think the thing of in B2C as well, it's probably improved a lot now, but sometimes there's can be a kind of disconnect between the attribution model and what's actually driving the business outcome. B2B more so probably because if you have the lag of like the sales cycle, and you're assuming if it's like last click. And I've talked to many people and they say, oh no, we know that last click is not that effective, but it's what we do because it kind of gives us the best view. But it's, yeah, I think getting more close to the business metrics. I think a lot of companies are evolving and moving in that direction, though. That gives you much better insight in terms of what exactly is driving it, and being agile enough to see, okay, this is, and we need to change this or whatever we need to do. But being very stuck in just a pure last click attribution model or multi-touch, whatever it may be, I don't think it always reflects accurately month on month, quarter on quarter, how people purchase. It's just not the way we are.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, this is where AI is being incredibly disruptive, because we're seeing that a lot of marketers are very concerned with the decline in their web traffic. What I would argue is, was web traffic actually a good measure? Or was that a measure of how effectively you gamified the system of SEO? And consumers want to take the control. They want to make the decision when they think is best. Like, no time in human history have humans had more access to information to help them make an informed decision for themselves. And so if that's the case, we shouldn't fight that as marketers. We should realize that that means accentuating our products and services benefits and our differentiators is even more important than ever. And I've always said that, honesty and trust is some of the best marketing you can ever do, right? You don't have to put a shine on it. You can just explain your product and service exactly as it is. And if that resonates deeply with the customers, they will come.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting you mentioned that as well about like SEO traffic and stuff. I spoke with somebody earlier today in cybersecurity, and they were saying how traffic they saw coming through via LLMs, it was converting to pipeline at about 50%, which is incredible when you think about people are just doing so much research on an LLM. They already know then, if they're getting reference, then that they have most of the questions answered. So I think it's going to change really how people think about SEO, but also then obviously the navigation and their website and the content and everything around that. So it's kind of like we're at the point of where the golden pages was to like Google maybe 25 years ago now with SEO and LLMs, and how that all plays out in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's interesting to see. I've heard the same statistics that pipeline from LLMs is being converted at a much higher rate. And this is, funnily enough, a challenge I pose to a lot of salespeople, because salespeople wonder, oh, well, like, what is the place for us in a world where they don't need to come to us for that education? And I would say, well, that is where you can lean into being your true consulting self.
Yeah.
One of the best salespeople I ever worked with several companies ago, he would tell you in a 30-minute call, he would take 29 minutes to tell you all of the reasons that a product was not right for you. And then in the last minute, he would tell you the few situations that it was right for you.
Yeah.
And that was thoughtful, right? That, because you have to...
Disarms your objections.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. And if people are doing that research beforehand, it's definitely true. I think there's... What's your opinion, though, in terms of, like, with AI... From what I see, there's two trails of thought. One is that it's given us huge amount of leverage on automation and scale, but on the other side, it's made people a little bit lazy, that we're putting that all out to just building really good go-to-market teams with GTM engineers and so on, and that we can automate all that. Personally, I think that the sales function, I think, is more important now than ever, because as people go through those queries and they get the information, if they don't have a human where they will be able to talk with, and like what you mentioned about your previous colleague about like maybe listing out those objections, but somebody that they can actually talk to, if that's not available and you're going to assume people are going to your sequence, I think you're going to have a lot of leakage. But I'd love to hear from your perspective for financial services in a heavily regulated industry. Do you see automation being a key driver to growth, or do you think it's like it can work on the stuff on the admin on the back end, but leave it away from trying to, bring customers or potential leads through a sequence of automations?
Yeah, this is where I would say, and especially having been in B2B with, let's call it high ACV products, I found that level of automation, if not done thoughtfully, ends up ruining your brand. And so what I always try and get people to focus on with AI, rather than thinking about, oh, now I can send not just 1,000 emails, I can send 100,000 emails. I instead focus on what is the frustrations of your team today. And 99 times out of 100, it's administration tasks.
Yep.
It's updating the CRM. It's those sorts of things. If you can get them those sorts of frustrations eliminated or at least reduced using AI, then suddenly you give them that much more mental space to spend on doing the truly creative, innovative, strategic work that humans really can do. And I think especially when you're dealing with a buying decision that is very complex, it is highly both regulated in terms of the types of products that can even be offered. Because of that, you need to be thinking about who are the relationships. How am I building true human connections? I think that is going to be even more important. I think we were already heading towards this world prior to AI, because we were already seeing, we were already seeing automations create, for lack of a better term, schlop, and now we've just put AI schlop. And this is nothing new. Right. Unfortunately, anytime new technologies come out, there are people and companies who use it poorly. I'm reminded, funnily enough, of the most recent example of Coca-Cola having done an AI ad again for their holiday campaign, and it's being dragged through the mud because people are reacting very poorly to it. And so, that gives us a key insight, right? By all means, reduce the administrative burden with powerful technology like AI. but you need to make sure that there is a human centricity, not only to your operations, but also to your brand and then your value proposition, because that's what people crave, and that is not changing anytime soon.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think is going to change, or any predictions that you have over the next, say, 6 to 18 months, in terms of in B2B, but particularly in financial services? Any changes you're seeing?
This is where I am very much a techno optimist. This is where I think that we're going to return to the magic of marketing. And I think while it exists for my industry, I think it's going to exist for all industries. I wrote a book, funnily enough. It was the first book I ever wrote I felt that we had missed a core part of what made marketing truly special when we over-rotated into demand gen, for lack of a better term. But I'd even go one step further to call it the growth hacking era, right? Where everything was about digital, everything was about measurement, and everything was about data. And we forgot there's always a human on the other side. I mean, maybe that changes in the future, but at least for today, humans are the ones still making the purchases. And if that is the case, then there is a human with hopes, with dreams, with desires. And I know, like, every single marketer I've talked to does not tell me the story of how they cleaned up a data dashboard or how they created more hygiene in their CRM. They always talk about the really creative, emotional campaigns. Like, that's why they got into the industry in the first place. And so I'm really hoping that as AI reduces that administrative burden on so many different industries, we get to re-fall in love with our industry all over again.
What was the book that you wrote, actually? We'll put it in the show notes.
It's called The Marketing Transformation Mindset. And I'll send you the link.
Great, yeah. Anything you're excited about, apart from the creative part, like any other trends in terms of, and I think that's really exciting, and I think there's a big need for it as well, for people, like, just to see content, to see stories, to see ads that actually stand out. I don't know if you're a fan of John Lewis, the Christmas ads they do in the UK. You've probably seen the latest one a couple of weeks ago. But, like, I think if you look at, like, kind of what is possible and what's really, really good, I think they're a great example. But there's huge opportunity, I think, for others as well. But apart from creative, anything else that you look at and you kind of see, okay, that's an interesting space?
Events are coming back full force. We obviously all got disrupted by COVID. Some events came back faster than others, but all industries took a hit there. Not only am I seeing events come back, but different than before. They're becoming a lot more experimental and a lot more experiential. That, I think, is going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. I know I even hosted during my Media Monks days some really creative events where we took executives at very stodgy companies, and we took them through exercises in breath work and meditation, and they loved it. They were like, this is the best event I've ever been to. And that seems to be a trend. More and more companies are realizing, hey, it's not just about, throwing the typical happy hour or throwing a conference or a dinner. It's how can I create a really unique experience that makes someone really remember us and our brand.
Yeah, that's a good one about the breath work. Actually, I never thought it's a simple enough idea, but you can see how it's quite relevant, because if you think about certain activities, I don't know, like whether it's rock climbing or something like that, maybe there's somebody that doesn't want to do that, but breath work, I think everyone can do it. You don't need a specific, obviously an expert that knows what they're doing, but it's a good one. Anything else in terms of what is, before we finish up, in terms of events or in terms of things that are happening with Vanguard over the next, say, 6 to 12 months that we would see in the media, or anything exciting that's on the roadmap that people would be interested in hearing about?
Yeah, so I think the biggest one is we currently have a podcast series with the Wall Street Journal.
Oh, great.
it's from our chief economist, Joe Davis, and we've already finished season 1, and we'll be having new seasons very shortly. And it's really, again, it's really thoughtfully done. It's all focused on, economics can often feel like this big macro picture. But how can we bring it down to the individual level? How can we bring it down to make sure that people are making well-informed, educated decisions to set themselves up for the future in terms of their finances? So that's a really exciting one. I've always been a big fan of podcasts, hence why we're even talking today, Marcus. So it's nice to see Vanguard getting into that as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great space to get in, and it's easy to consume as well. What we'll do is we'll leave the link to the podcast series on the show notes and to your book as well, if people want to pick up a copy. Patrick, thanks very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks a lot. Just one final thing before we go. If anyone wants to connect with you or see your content, obviously we leave your link to your book on the show notes, but where are you most active normally?
It's always LinkedIn. So
great.
LinkedIn.com/IN/Patrick James Ward.
Perfect. We'll leave a link on the show notes. Patrick, thanks again. Great speaking with you.
You too, Marcus.